Hello everybody, welcome to another video. I received a message from a good friend on Facebook who tipped me off that there was a mid-century dresser at the end of someone's road, right in front of the dumpster. It was about a half-hour drive and I was a little bit worried it might not be there. When I got there, I don't know why I was worried, because it was pretty rough. There's only so many people that are going to pick up something like this. So the first thing I do whenever I find a roadside piece is I look it over really well. I take all of the drawers out and I look for bugs. Cockroaches, bed bugs, nobody wants to think about it, but sometimes there are reasons that these pieces get discarded. So once I can rule that out, I do a sniff test. And immediately I could tell this had been kept in probably a damp room for some time. It just had that old musty lake cottage smell. Even though I hate dealing with mildew and musty smells, I just had a feeling about this piece. So I scooped it up and took it home. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. So, turns out there was, in fact, a critter in this. But it's not the kind you think. I sped him up a little because he's kind of slow. I had already set the camera up and had gone to get tools. He was a bit of a surprise when I came back, but he got an eviction notice and I put him out in the yard. I already know that the honkin' chunks of wood that someone bolted to the bottom of this was probably a big portion of the smell that I was smelling, as well as what you can see on the inside of the backer board. There was some mildew there, but these legs were the worst. They were so damp, and honestly, I'm watching this back now and I'm cringing because I didn't have gloves on and I probably should have. Ugh, gross. I'm going to pull the rest of the drawers out and get to cleaning this piece. I'm actually happy with how the drawers are. They're dovetailed, they're all wood. This actually would have been a fairly well made piece back in the day. Actually, you can see a dryer sheet there. Every drawer had a dryer sheet in it when I picked it up. I think that was someone's attempt at mitigating the smell, but it didn't work. I made sure to vacuum inside and out, get the back, and then I flipped this over onto its back so that I could deal with the mildew. Now normally I would replace these back pieces, but as you can see, for some reason all of the drawer guides are actually glued and stapled to the backboard, so it would have been really difficult to take this apart. After only one treatment of that mold control, all of the spores are gone. Quite often the stain will remain, but the active spores are gone. These light brown spots on the back are not mold or mildew. You can actually see on the top here something sprayed or splattered on it. It could have been mud from someone driving by. I have no idea, but even though it's not mold, I'm going to give it a spray anyway. There are so many things you can use to clean out the inside of pieces when they have a moldy or mildewy smell. I've heard of using hydrogen peroxide. A few people have recommended vodka. I've never tried that. Vinegar and sunlight is good for very mild cases. This was an extreme case, so I used a bleach solution. It does a good job of cleaning and deodorizing and also kills any residual mold spores that might happen to be on the wood. I put on my respirator and am using this clear odor blocking primer, and I like the spray because it gets in areas that's a little bit harder to get at with a brush. Now, I've had quite a few comments lately from people complaining how much I complain about odors in furniture and how all old pieces smell. That's not true at all. I've seen 200- and 300-year-old pieces that don't have an odor because they were taken care of. Literally, nobody wants to buy furniture for their clothes that stinks. It just does not happen. So stop that. There's nothing wrong with trying to rid a piece of an old odor. So I'm using some shellac. I'm just going to give it a good stir here and then pour a little bit into this empty can and then brush from that. There was still just a little bit of that musty smell, so the shellac will take care of that. Shellac is amazing at blocking tan and bleed through, stains, knots, and odors. Now let's talk about the top for a second. You can see there's a little chip in the veneer, and then this very odd colored coating. This is actually an adhesive wood grain, much like you'd see in drawer liners. The drawers themselves, they're not solid walnut, but they have a walnut veneer over top of a solid wood substrate and solid walnut handles. The top and sides are a walnut veneer over top of pressed wood, which is extremely popular and common in mid-century furniture. You can see someone has driven a few finish nails in there for some reason, so I'm going to have to repair that. Looking at this piece as a whole, it has a very uniform sort of drab brown color to it. Now unfortunately, these handles are pretty securely attached, but there's no way for me to finish underneath of them without removing them. A couple of them even have splits in the wood, so I have repairs to make there anyway. So I'm going to extremely carefully pry these off. Whenever I do this, I pry from the bottom rather than the top. And I used a very thin putty knife to get in there just a little bit, and then I used my thicker one to kind of coax this off. I made sure to number each handle as it was coming off the drawers so that I could put it on in the exact spot that it was initially. You can see one of the splits here. This is one of the ones that was already there before I tried to pry it off. And you can see that these were held on with 6 sets of staples and a little bit of wood glue. Now if you're careful when you pry these off, you can just back these staples out really carefully. You don't want to bend them, and then when you're ready to reattach the handles, you add your fresh wood glue and you can put these staples right back in the original holes. I've never had a problem with them coming off doing it this way as long as I use wood glue with it. To fix those cracked handles, all I did was push some wood glue down into the cracks and clamp them up. Now when I'm clamping these, I want to make sure that the 2 sections stay level, so I'm using a small clamp here. And then I'll use a larger clamp to push those 2 surfaces together. And you can see I got a nice squeeze out there. It's time to take that old finish off. For the drawer faces, I used a scraper. And then grabbed my Surf Prep with a 180 grit sand pad. Because the majority of the finish was already gone, 180 is plenty. I don't really have to remove much material, all I'm doing is smoothing things out. After the 180, I finished up with a 220 grit. As I mentioned, these drawer faces are a walnut veneer over top of a different solid wood, so that's why the top and sides here look a lot lighter, so I'm going to have to stain those to match the front once I do the clear coat. I used a 180 grit pad on the handles as well, and then hand sanded with 220 to finish up and get inside those little holes. As I sanded the old wood glue off each of the handle bottoms, I made sure to rewrite the number that I had just sanded off so I knew which drawer that belonged to. A couple of these nails that someone drove in here aren't even attached to anything. You can see how easy that was to pull out. I'm going to take out these 2 because they're not really doing anything. And there's a third one there that seems to have caught wood on the other side. I'm going to leave that one in. This support block is not attached very well or doing very much, so I'm going to take it off. And even though I don't show it on camera, at the end when I'm ready to put everything back together, I'm going to reattach that and re-glue it. This one nail is in there quite far, so all I'm doing is driving it in below the surface of the veneer so that I can put a little patch there and hide it. I'm using this epoxy wood to fill this gap. It's a 2-part mixture. You have to mix it together with your fingers, and this dries almost harder than wood in most cases. So I'm going to slowly build it up, give it the rough shape I'm looking for, and then I can refine it with sanding later on. So I'm ready now to reattach the handles. I've already done all my sanding, so I'm just using this little hammer to tap the staples out just a tiny bit. I don't want them all the way in yet, but if I tap them out just a little bit, then it's going to help me know exactly where to set these down. I'm going to add a little bit of wood glue to the bottom, and sorry for the blurry shot here, I'm going to just lay it down over top of the staples. Now I don't want this handle full of glue to move around while I'm stapling it back together, so I'm just using a clamp to hold on here while I tap these in. And while the wood glue is drying, I'm going to have 2 clamps on one side and a larger clamp on the other side. I'm super happy and optimistic with how this is shaping up so far. But now it is time to have a look at the top. I already know that underneath this adhesive coating there is walnut veneer, but my question is, why did they put this over top? I can see the faint indentation of a few scratches. I'm hoping it's nothing terrible, but there's only one way to find out. There are different methods you can use to remove this stuff. I like using a stripper. It somehow magically dissolves the adhesive underneath without disintegrating everything. And often you can peel it right off, and you'll see that in a minute. Is that not the most beautiful thing ever? Scraping paint off and stripping old finishes is always super satisfying, but for some reason peeling something off, I love it. I'm pretty happy so far with what I can see of the veneer. I see a few scratches, but nothing terrible yet. I'm hoping the second half will be as good. While I'm letting the stripper soak into that wrap on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and add some more to this side because now I have to scrape off the old finish from the veneer itself. And look at that gorgeous walnut wood grain underneath. I'm already so excited. I'm going to be using Odie's oil on this piece, and I know it's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And wait for it. There it is. Burn mark. That is the reason I think that they put a cover over it. Either to hide that or try to protect it from happening again, I'm not sure. I continue stripping and scraping off the top, and actually to my surprise, when I scraped the finish over top, it actually diminished a little bit. Once I get the rest of this goop off, I'm going to add a little stripper just to that area, and using a wire brush carefully see if I can lighten it a bit more. And it did work a little bit, but only to a certain point, and then it stopped. But we'll see how this looks after I do sanding. Okay, so I should be in the garage right now working on furniture, but instead I'm in my car, hands-free, don't worry, on my way to a pet store where a man just brought in a mama bunny and 2 babies in a toilet box. You know, a lot of you guys love the little rescue bunny intermissions, and they're cute, and it's a playful segment usually with, you know, upbeat music, and it's adorable, but there's another side to this, and this is it. On one hand, I'm grateful that they didn't just dump them outside or kill them just for existing. But flip side is the pet store is not allowed legally to take surrenders, so I have to go get them. This wasn't really meant to be a depressing rescue bunny intermission, but it's just, there is another side to it. It's not all just cute bunnies, you know. This is Mama Bunny and one of her 2 babies that she came with. We were first told there were 3 or 4 babies, but they could only catch 2 of them. The other little baby, this little guy, I'm not going to show you his injuries because I just don't want to put that on my channel, but his other eye was extremely bad and we're pretty sure he's blind in that eye. We're trying to save it, and he also had a pretty bad injury on his foot, which we're also trying to save. Later that day, we get a call that a 3rd baby had been found, this little guy. And then a couple of days later, this little guy. We're figuring they're actually about 3 weeks old, and there was a little bit of a lag between when I picked this guy up and had to take him into the lady who runs the rescue, who is also a vet tech. So it gave me a chance to take him home, check him over for any injuries, check his ears and his eyes and his skin, and he seems to be doing pretty good. The last update I got is that Mum's doing great. The little blonde bunny is doing great, and the guy with the eye and the foot injuries is doing better, but he's not out of the woods yet, so I'll keep you updated on that little party of 5. If you do want to find out more about these little guys, you can find the rescue on Facebook under 10,000 Carrots Rabbit Rescue. After my first bit of sanding with 180 grit, there were some holes and dings that I needed to fill, so I used some walnut wood filler, let that dry, and then went in and hand sanded with 220, and that gave me a nice smooth surface to apply my Odie's to. You'll notice there are a few little light scratches. They weren't really deep enough to try to steam out with an iron, and I think they're going to blend in just fine. When you have wood grain like this on the drawers, often there is a pattern, so I'm just moving them around here until I figure it out, and then I'm going to go underneath and mark where the drawers go so that they don't get mixed up again. More often than not, when you get a dresser like this, the drawers are usually in the wrong spots. So this girl needs some legs, and I have legs for days. I have several drawers and containers full of old legs. These ones I think will be perfect with some cleaning up. I apologize for the blurry clip here, but I just used a scraper to get a fair bit of the old finish off, and then I'm going to go in and sand the rest. I used a 100 grit to blast through any remaining finish first, and then I went in with a 180 as my final. I'm going to have to stain these, so I don't want to go too high with my grit. I used this Mastercraft tool here to try to remove as much of the rust as possible off the threaded sections, and it did a pretty good job. As is the case with most walnut veneer pieces I do that I use Odie's oil on, you're going to see both heartwood and sapwood, so you're going to get 2 different tones, and that is always a dilemma when it comes to legs. Do I stain the legs to match the heartwood, or do I stain the legs to match the sapwood? And most of the time I do it darker. This time I'm going to do it a little bit lighter and closer to that sapwood, so I'm excited to see what it looks like. I'm using the Universal Odie's oil, and I'm just applying it with a 1500 grit Mirka Merlon gray pad. Odie's is an awesome tung oil based finish. It's not an oil like you might be thinking of an oil. It's not like a Danish oil or a hemp oil or anything like that. It's kind of its own thing. It belongs to a group of finishes called hard wax oils. It is a bit labor intensive to put on, but for me, I actually like that part of it. And it just brings out the natural depth and beauty and warmth of the wood like no other finish I've ever tried. I just wanted to take a moment and say a huge thank you to everyone who has helped support my channel, whether that's subscribing and liking and commenting on my videos, sending super thanks, and buy me a teas, Amazon gifts. Speaking of which, there's something that came in the mail a couple of days ago that you don't see me use in this video, but I did end up using it on this piece, and that is this Makita pin nailer. I wanted to give the walnut handles just a little extra grip, and the 23 gauge pins are perfect for something like this because it's less likely to split the wood than a finishing nail. There was no note with this gift, so whoever sent this to me, you rock. Thank you so much. This is going to be a huge help in my workroom. My last step is just doing these little touch-ups, and I'm using these Mohawk graining markers to sort of mimic the wood grain where I used the wood epoxy to fill in the gap. This poor stinky forgotten dresser was literally dumped at the curb in front of the dumpster, ready for garbage pickup. It was that morning and I got there just in time. I had no idea if I was going to be able to save this piece or what my intention was with it, but I'm glad that I was tipped off, and I'm glad it was still there when I pulled up. This took a few days to pull off, but I'm so excited to show you what this dingy, dumpy piece looks like now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Okay. I just finished editing the video, I was getting the reveal ready, and I noticed I messed up. It happens. But here's the thing. I was so confused by it that I had to go back to the before picture. What I noticed in my after picture is that the middle column of drawers, the handles on the middle column of drawers, they have a certain grain pattern, okay? And I didn't notice before until I was looking at the video, but the grain pattern is messed up. I can't change the drawers around because there is a pattern on the drawers that flows from one column to the next. And because I numbered each handle as I took it off the drawer, I could not figure out how this happened. So I went back to the before picture, and even though the drawers are in a different order than they should be, I could still figure out which drawer was which, and I realized I didn't mess up. The manufacturer messed up. On 2 of the drawers, they had the handles reversed, and they used toner to cover it up. So 2 of the handles on the original piece were so dark you couldn't even see the pattern on it, and it was those 2 drawers. Anyway, I'm super upset because those handles are now glued and pinned into those drawer faces, but I can't unsee the wrong pattern, so I don't know what I'm gonna do. I would have to literally take the handles off and put them on the correct drawers. Which means I'll probably have to redo those drawers, but keep that in mind when you're looking at the reveal pictures. The dresser is absolutely beautiful. I'm so happy with it, with the exception of that, and I'm just gutted that I didn't notice it before it was too late. But I'm also relieved that I didn't mess it up. As I pulled each handle off initially to redo it, I marked it and then marked the drawer so that I could put them back together, and that's exactly what I did. But unfortunately, I put them back together the way they initially put them together wrong, and that really sucks. So, pro tip, make sure the manufacturers didn't mess up before you put something back together. Anywho, enjoy the reveal. I want to cry.